How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, March 15th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual profile on Paul Pogba, the starting midfielder for France and for Manchester United, because today he turns 28. And my intention with this profile is to let his accolades and his achievements speak for himself as to why I believe he stands out amongst all of the midfielders that play soccer in the world as elite. And I just think, if I go through if I go through his career year by year, it'll give a little bit more of understanding of how they got here where they are now. So if you're unfamiliar with Paul Pogba, he stands at about 6'3" ish. He's pretty lean. He has incredible footwork. He's an incredible passer. He's an incredible captain when he really, really wants to be. I think the biggest criticism on him is that it's very obvious when he turns it on and turns it off for games. But I think that he has won more than enough to get people off of his back, and I think that he has a lot more to win, considering he's only 28. He still has a lot more good soccer to play. But without further ado, I'm just going to give you just the background. So originally, he's coming out of Lagny-sur-Marne in France. I completely butchered the name of the city, so please don't torch me. He would find his way moving around Europe in his youth career before he eventually got picked up by Manchester United in 2011, 2012. And during 2011-2012, his age 18 season, he would only play about 3 matches, 71 minutes for Manchester United. So following that one season, of course, this will be a season where Manchester United would finish second in the Premier League. So he would not see himself get enough playing time on that lineup. So Manchester United would move him to Juventus. Still as a teenager, he would he would find a way to make his presence felt on this team. In 2012-2013, in Paul Pogba's age 19 season, he would end up starting 18 of the 27 matches he would play for Juventus in a season where they would go on to win the Serie A. This would be the second out of the 9 straight titles that Juventus have won since 2011-2012. And they also went on to win the Supercopa de España as Antonio Conte. This would be Antonio Conte's second straight year with Juventus, just to give a sense of a little bit of context of where Juventus was. In that season, Paul Pogba would finish with 5 goals in the 27 matches that he played, which is incredibly tough considering he's a midfielder and midfielders aren't supposed to score. But he would find his presence being felt a lot. And then, of course, in 2013, he would go on to represent France in the FIFA U20 World Cup, where he was actually named the best player in the tournament despite not playing in the tournament itself, despite not playing in the final game. But of course, by being named the best player in the U20 tournament for France's first ever team, that should, of course, cause a lot of heads to look your way. And, of course, a lot of the pressure was on Paul Pogba from that season on. In his second season at Juventus in 2013-2014, in his age 20 season, he would go on to start 33 of the 36 matches he would play in a season where Juventus would go on and win the Serie A, quite possibly his best season. They finished with 102 points in the table, which I think is probably the most amount of points they've ever put up in the table in their history as a club. And this was the time they won their 30th title. This was their 3rd in a row. And this would be their 2nd straight Supercopa Italia final, just to give a sense of where Juventus was at the time. In this season, Paul Pogba would finish with 7 goals and 8 assists. I guess he would, up until this point, he never scored so many goals, and he definitely never touched that many assists in Serie A. And then expanding it, he also added a goal and then 2 assists in the international cups that he played in. He finished with a goal and an assist in the 2014 FIFA World Cup after getting called up for the very first time. After getting demoted from Champions League, he would help Juventus score once in Europa League, just to give a sense of what Paul Pogba was on. But that was Paul Pogba up through his age 2021 season, and he would continue to get better and better for Juventus as a lot of eyes were turning on him. In his age 21 season at Juventus in 2014-15, Paul Pogba would start 24 of the 26 matchups he'd play in a season where, of course, Juventus would make the champion, and they'd win the Serie A title for the fourth year in a row, the third year in a row since Pogba was there. They went on to win the Coppa Italia for the first time since Pogba had been there, and they were Champions League runner-up, and they were runners-up in the Supercoppa Italia to give a sense of how strong Juventus was. In the Serie A itself, for the 26 games he played, Paul Pogba finished with 8 goals and 3 assists, the most Serie A goals he'd ever score in a season up until that point, and then adding in his 1 domestic cup and 1 goal and 3 assists. In terms of what he was doing internationally, Paul Pogba would finish with 10 goals and 6 assists for the entire season, according to Football Reference. And of course, like, the legend of Paul Pogba was growing, and he was starting to become an incredibly valuable player at Juventus, and this would all lead into his last year in Italy. In his final year with Juventus in 2015-2016, he would start 33 of the 35 matches that he would play in Serie A. And this season, he would finish with 8 goals and 12 assists for Juventus, in a season where Juventus would, of course, win the title for the 5th year in a row since 2011-2012. They would go on to win the Coppa Italia for the 2nd year in a row while he was there, and they also went on to win the Supercoppa Italia for 3 of the last 4 years that he was there, as they went out in the round of 16. But of course, within the season, like I said, Paul Pogba had 8 goals and 12 assists. He's only scored that many goals in Serie A the previous year, but he never scored that many assists. And then, of course, add in what he was doing internationally, and you get a sense for his impact that season. He had a goal and 2 assists in Champions League. So with these 10 goals and 15 assists, Paul Pogba had established himself as a good enough prospect to get signed with Manchester United. And of course, before he went to Man U, this was a player that was named the Serie A Player of the Year and the Juventus Player of the Year. 2-time Italian Super Cup winner, 4-time Italian champ or Serie A champ, and 2-time Italia Coppa winner. Not to mention the U21 the World Cup champion. So this would lead until Paul Pogba got back to Manchester United, the team that he's currently on, the team whose academy he eventually started, or he got his start on. And once he got back to Manchester United, he would kind of help pick up what was there. In 2016-2017, in Pogba's age 23 season, he would start 29 of the 30 games that he would play for Man U, in a season where they would finish with the 6th best record in the Premier League. They would go on to win the EFL Cup final. They would go on to win the Community Cup Shield, and they would go on to win Europa League. And this is when Zlatan Ibrahimovic was the leading scorer for Manchester United for that one season. And of course, in Paul Pogba's first season back, he would finish with 5 goals and 4 assists in the Premier League itself. And then adding in what he did outside of it, he was able to score 3 goals in Champions League to help, he scored 3 goals in Europa League to help Manchester United, of course, win that title. And even though they finished 6th, Manchester United would continue to get better ever since they added Paul Pogba, and of course this is when he came back when he was about 23-ish. But of course, this would transition into Paul Pogba's second season for Manchester United in 2017-2018, his age 24 season. He would start 25 of the 27 games in a season where Manchester United would finish with the 2nd best record in all of the Premier League. They would finish as runners-up in the FA Cup final as well, and runners-up in the Super Cup, as they would go out losing in the round of 16, and this would be the season that Romelu Lukaku led all of Manchester United in scoring. And then within the Premier League itself, Paul Pogba would finish with 6 goals and 10 assists in the Premier League, the only time that he's ever broken double-digit amount of assists in the Premier League in his career. And then adding what he did outside of the Premier League, he was able to add an assist in domestic cups and then 1 in Champions League as well. And following his second season in Manchester United, he would lead the France team in 2018 as a 25-year-old to help win their first World Cup since I believe since 1998. That's the last time that France has ever won the World Cup, so that was the last time but Paul Pogba would hold down the center midfield along N'Golo Kante, and of course in the group stage, they beat Australia and Peru as they drew with Denmark. In the round of 16, they ended up beating Argentina 4-3. They beat Uruguay in the quarterfinal 2-0. They beat Belgium 1-0 in the semifinal. And then the final, they ended up beating Croatia 4-2. The third goal of that matchup would go to Paul Pogba as France would raise the World Cup title, and of course that was a very big moment, and Paul Pogba was an incredibly important player within that structure. And then following the World Cup win, going back into his third season at Manchester United, his age 25 season, he would start 34 of the 35 matches in a season where Manchester United would finish 6th in the Premier League. They would lose in the sixth round of the FA Cup. They lost in the third round of the EFL Cup, and they would end up losing in the quarterfinal of Champions League. This would be the only season that Paul Pogba led the team in scoring. As in the Premier League, he would finish with 13 goals and 9 assists in those 35 games. But I remind you that he was a midfielder. Midfielders aren't usually supposed to score like that. And then adding in his goal in domestic cups, and then his 2 goals that would eventually come in Champions League. He would go on to score 16 goals for the team, but the team would still qualify for Europa League the very next year. So, of course, Paul Pogba was incredibly instrumental in helping Manchester United achieve that goal. And this would lead into Pogba's 4th season with Manchester United, which was the last season that was most recently completed. And in 2019-2020, he would start 13 of the 16 matches in a season where Manchester United would finish with the 3rd best record in all of the Premier League. They lost the semifinals of the FA Cup. Same with the EFL Cup. They lost in the semifinals of Europa League, and Anthony Martial would be the leading scorer. And in the specific season, I believe his season was cut short either due to illness or injury or both. But within the season, he would finish with 1 goal and 3 assists in the 16 matches that he would play. And then, of course, add in his other performances from his other matches. It wasn't one of his biggest output goal or assist seasons, but I mean, he was still recovering from injury, and still when he played, he was one of the most formidable opponents on the soccer pitch. So this would transition into Paul Pogba's current season with Manchester United, right? Coming into the season, after his 1 season at Manchester United, then his 4 seasons at Juventus, and then his 4 successive seasons at Man U. Right now, we're looking at one of the best midfield players in the entire world, who's been to 2 completely different countries and played and held it down for 2 of the best midfields in the world, not to mention the French midfield that won the World Cup, and he was one of the best players. And now that Manchester United is starting to get a lot stronger, he's looking more and more valuable as the team around him gets better. And currently in this season, in 2020-2021, a season that had to get pushed back a little due to the coronavirus, naturally, he would start 15 of the 19 games so far for Manchester United in a season where Manchester United is currently sitting 2nd in the Premier League. They sit 14 points behind first place Man City, and they also sit 1 point ahead of 2nd place Leicester City. And they're also sitting in Europa League in the round of 16 against AC Milan, to give a sense of where they're playing there, as their next matchup will be on Thursday, March 18th at 4 o'clock, as that aggregate is tied at 1-1, as Milan will host the second match, just to get a sense of what Paul Pogba is doing next. And like I just said, back to the Premier League season in which they're finishing 2nd. Paul Pogba has 3 goals in the 19 games that he's played this season, and then not to mention what he's doing in the other in the other competitions. He also has 2 assists in Champions League. He had 2 assists in Champions League, and now they're playing in Europa League, just so we can see what's going on with that. But that's everything that's going on with Paul Pogba up to date. And I think that this is definitely a player that's getting a lot better with his form over time. And with that said, I think that his accomplishments and his accolades most definitely speak for themselves. And I think that going forward, especially for the 2021 calendar year, that Paul Pogba is an elite player to keep your eye on. And with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 16 minutes of my piece. Once again, I hope all is well. I want to wish Paul Pogba a happy 28th birthday. I hope all is well. And if you ever get a chance to watch Paul Pogba, he's currently wearing number 6 for Manchester United. Or if you're going to watch France, he's wearing number 6 for France too, probably as well. But with that said, I want to thank everyone once again for getting a chance to listen to my piece. I hope all is well, and I will catch you tomorrow once all of today's exhibitions are finished. And I will do an individual profile on Blake Griffin, the currently 31-year-old elite starting power forward who's now playing for the Brooklyn Nets. And then Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the elite young first baseman who is now playing for the Toronto Blue Jays. And at the same time, I want to wish a happy birthday to Joel Embiid, the elite starting 26-year-old center who's currently playing for the Philadelphia 76ers. So once again, thanks for listening to all 16 minutes of my piece. I hope all is well, and I will get back to you tomorrow. Peace out. I'll catch you tomorrow.